You think the hard part is over once the offer is accepted? Think again. That's what we're going to talk about today, is the things that can go wrong once the offer is accepted, so that you guys can be prepared.
We're David and Jessica, your local realtors here in Central Florida. Today we're diving right into it. One of the first things that sellers ignore is the pre-inspection repairs.
It's optional to do it, but we recommend it because that way you're prepared to see what an inspection report is going to look like. What are the things that come up? It may benefit some homeowners to do it prior to listing the house on the property so that you can tackle on those things. You already know your roof is older, you already know certain things need to be repaired, then maybe you don't need to hire an inspector to do a pre-inspection, and you just need to make those repairs ahead of listing your property. Because we know buyers are gonna negotiate in this market. They're gonna negotiate if the roof is older. They're gonna negotiate if the water heater is older. Why? Because those things come up on the home insurance, and it makes it costly for the buyers to get home insurance. And as you know, this market is not an affordable one. Any excuse that the buyer can have to negotiate that offer or that price down, we want to try to catch it before.
I mean, one of those things that I always tell clients, make sure if there's things that you can go ahead and get it fixed beforehand of time, go ahead and get it fixed. Makes a big difference. Instead of it coming up in the inspection report, those are things that have already been taken care of. And the buyers just feel a lot better. They feel more secure.
There's a difference between a house when they walk in and they see, we need to paint, we need to do this, the baseboards look like a little damage, maybe you had a dog or whatever the case is. If the house is not well kept, it just raises flags for buyers.
We just listed a really nice house, and even with it being such a nice house, it still had a couple concerns, not major concerns, but there were little concerns that came up in the inspection report. And guys, remember, an inspection report is meant to give you some type of clarity on what's going on with the house. Right.
And so not every inspector is going to list the same things that another inspector is going to list. So you also have to keep that in mind if you want to spend the money on a pre-inspection, that the second inspector that the buyer brings, he may list something completely different. So there's pros and cons to this. But my best advice is, if you know there are things that need to be repaired, let us know, because then we can guide you on what those things are that are more important for you to get prepared.
Jessica, for the people that don't know, what is a pre-inspection?
Pre-inspection is just an inspection that happens prior to listing your home. So the buyer is going to do their own inspection, but you as a seller, you can have your own inspection done if you wanted to make sure that there's nothing major happening with your house. That way you don't have any surprises. And if there are major things that need to be repaired, then we can just let the buyer know ahead of time.
What are major repairs when it comes to an inspection that you, for me as a buyer looking in, what would that look like?
So in the state of Florida, we work typically, not always, but typically we work with the as-is contract. And your contract is as is. However, the buyer can still request for items to be repaired, or they can request a credit so that they can repair those items after closing. The main things that we focus on are the AC, the roof, the electrical, the plumbing, and the water heater. Those are the 5 major components that a house needs to be livable. Now, we also say if there are any other safety concerns, then we will address them as well. So just because it is an as-is contract doesn't mean that the house is as is. However, if we know those repairs ahead of time, we can already handle that objection with the buyer's agent or the buyer. For example, this seller had a pool that the waterfall was not working. She let us know right away, we're not doing that repair. And we in turn explained that to the buyer. They're already aware. So they're not going to request that because they're already aware as they're putting the offer that these items are not going to be repaired. So it also benefits us to know so that we can tackle it head on. The next thing that can derail the transaction is if the seller is unwilling whatsoever to make concessions or negotiate if the buyer has a valid reason to negotiate any particular items. We are in a buyer's market, and sometimes your first offer, not sometimes, most of the time your first offer is going to be your best offer. So it is important that you do have some flexibility to work with the buyer. Our job is to try and make it a win-win for everybody. You as the seller would need to, I always ask the sellers to put themselves in a buyer's shoes. Would you buy a house with a roof that needs to be replaced in 2 years? You know, would you buy that house? Because it's an honest question that we have, that the buyer is facing.
And it's a big ticket item as well too.
Right, exactly. That's just an example, but
that can often trigger cancellations. And remember guys, we're in a crunch period when it comes to inspections periods. Sometimes we negotiate 7 days, sometimes we can negotiate 10 days. For the most part, we are in a crunch time, so we need to act fast and get these inspection reports as soon as possible so we can go over it, and that way the buyer can make an educated decision on whether he wants to move forward or not.
And I like to add that it's not in the seller's best interest to go back on the market, because when we go back on the market, the agents are going to call us and say, hey, what happened? And we have to disclose exactly what the situation was.
And it starts alarming
other people
agents and other people. Hey, is there anything wrong with the house? Why is it back on the market? So we try to avoid that.
Right.
So that's why inspection periods are very critical. So we have to try to make everything work.
There are times that a seller either cannot afford to do a pre-inspection because the budget is tight, and they can't even do repairs. What are their options?
So there is options and there is ways around this. I know for repairs, there's companies out there that do like a buy now, pay later type situation where you can get the service done. Some of them do require for the house to already be under contract or in some more terms. But for the most part, there's options where you can get it fixed now and then pay at closing. Pay at closing, right. Okay, so the next one, failing to disclose any known issues on the house. For sellers, it's best to disclose anything that you know of the property, because that way we could avoid, all the time wasted. And if there's things that we can attack and get it repaired before the inspection, then it's always good to at least address it or repair it before.
Right.
So I have a good example. We were working with a buyer. We took a couple months to find the house. We finally found the right house that he liked. And when we went to go see the house, we bypassed this crack. We didn't think nothing of it. If I'm not mistaken, I remember it being filled the day that we went for the first time to the house. And when we came back to do the inspection, the crack apparently had opened up a little bit more. It was bigger. And now we have a foundation issue. We have a foundation issue. You can probably fit maybe 3-4 quarters in that one crack, which is a big red flag for us. There was an issue with the foundation, and it was going to be a hefty price to get these things fixed. So that's why it's very good to know and make sure that you really thoroughly look at the house when you go the first time. Take videos, because that way you can compare from the first time you went to the house to the second time because sometimes there's a big time gap in between that you go to the first house and then you don't go back till a couple months later. So it's always good to do videos and make sure that we know everything that's going on with the house. And
another thing that you as a seller can do is you can get home warranty for the time. Sometimes our sellers do this for the time that we're listed, because if your refrigerator dies or something happens with your AC, then you have warranty and you're not having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars. You bought home warranty, which is right. I would say $60 to $100 a month, but at least you're protected and not having to spend so much.
It brings me back to our client that her AC broke while we were listing our house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
we were under contract.
And
she had to call an AC technician and fix it because the AC was completely, the motor, was it?
Motor? It was the AC motor broke. So these are big ticket items, guys.
A lot of times buyers will ask either for credit or repairs. I've seen it where the buyer just doesn't want to deal with it. They want you to repair it. They want you to handle that issue. And then other times they want the credit so that they can hire someone that they trust to repair, get the job done. So I've seen it both ways. It's on a case-by-case scenario. So it's important that sellers are flexible with whatever makes the buyer feel comfortable. Remember, they're not spending $10,000. This is a mortgage that they're getting. They're spending a lot of money and they're probably going to be living here for 10, 20 years, sometimes the full 30 years, So it's important to have that empathy towards the buyer because you might be needing to buy too after you sell, and you're going to be dealing with all of this as well as the buyer.
Yeah, the next one is assuming the buyers won't walk away and cancel. And this is a big one because you want to make sure you keep the transaction running, right? One of the things that we see with buyers these days is that since they have so many options, it could just be one little turn off. It's just, that's it. Yeah. They're closed. Their minds is done. They're moving on. So one of the things that I always tell sellers, hey, make sure the house is very nice and organized. Make sure it's clean. Make sure it smells good when they walk in. Because these things trigger as a buyer, they start thinking in their brains, right? Oh, wow, if this house is kept like this, they probably kept the house well maintained, right? Throughout the years.
Yeah, we're in a buyer's market, so they have options. They don't have to have your house. And a lot of sellers think that their house is the most beautiful one, and rightfully so. You're emotionally attached to your house, and that's your house. You bought it, you lived in it, you made all these updates. You're emotionally attached, but the buyer isn't. There are options. We're almost to the end of this. The next point is the appraisal period. This is very, very important that you have when you're pricing your home, you really follow the recommended price based on what the seller has pulled on the comps, because typically that's what the appraiser is also going to pull. So you don't want a situation where you're already 20 days into the contract and you're almost out of the house. You're pretty much packed out of the house and then the house does not appraise. Really, really tough to get it fixed, right? Or reappraised. So my recommendation with that is make sure you are listening to your agent. Hopefully that's us. And you're pricing your home according to what the data says. And we do not tell you what the price of the home is, but we kind of guide you as to what that price should be based on the comps. So when the appraiser comes, I'm confident that I can show them, hey, this is how we came up with this price, and I can defend your price. But if I don't feel confident that I can defend your price, then that's when things can get sticky. We have to renegotiate, and then you lose money. The buyer feels like they're not getting a deal. So it's important to price your home right.
It's good when it's over appraised, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's when it's good for the buyer.
For the buyer, yeah. But we don't never want to leave money on the table. But the truth of the matter is that this is the market that we're in. So price it right where the buyer may have a couple thousands in equity, because that makes them feel good. That makes them feel like, okay, I'm not overpaying. Right. You know what I mean?
They walk into a house with some equity.
And it doesn't mean that you're losing your money, you're leaving money on the table. It's just that you gave some wiggle room to price it correctly for the market that we're in.
And the last one, buyers losing their finance. And what does that mean? The bank saying no.
That's right. So it can happen where the buyer buys a car when they're not supposed to. That raises red flags for the loan approval process. It could be anything under the sun, maybe correct transfer into a bank account, large money coming in, large deposits. Anything can happen during those 30 days, which you're under contract with the buyer's loan process. So what we try to do, and we try to do the best that we can, sometimes lenders are not very, how do I say this? They're not very, they like to hide things. They're not very honest, but there are certain questions that we can ask along the process that will expose where the buyer is at in the loan process, and if there are any red flags that indicate that the buyer may not close. Now, there's no guarantee that we can find this out from the buyer's lender unless we're also representing on the other side, but typically during the transaction and at certain points, we ask specific questions to the buyer's lender to make sure that the buyer is still on track. And that way we also know, are we within the timeline to close? Because we have to match it with the seller's plan too. If they have to move somewhere else, there are multiple parts happening. And so we ask a couple of questions along the way to try and catch when anything is going wrong or if there are any delays. So there you have it, guys. If you have any transactions that have gone wrong, let us know in the comments. We'd love to see different scenarios and maybe how it was resolved or wasn't resolved. That will open up more feedback to anybody that's selling, and it'll help somebody. And if you have any questions or you would like to get on a call with us, we're happy to help as well.